Let me start congratulating Slovakia for joining the OECD survey of adult skills. It gives you an accurate picture of Slovakia's talent pool, but also of the opportunities adults in Slovakia have to use their skills effectively. Skills are the currency of 21st century economies. Skills help us navigate life's complexities and to take smart decisions. I know as technologies such as artificial intelligence advance, some people question whether human skills will retain their value or gradually become obsolete. But the reality is always more nuanced. AI is likely to complement, not substitute, human intelligence, and it would change the nature of work and the skills that are needed. Slovakia is among 31 countries that took part in this survey of adult skills. And Slovakia also took part in our first survey of adult skills. So we now have a decade's worth of data showing how skills in Slovakia have evolved. And that allows you to compare your population's skills with those of other nations, to track changes over time, and also to identify areas that need improvement. When you look at the results overall, a few countries stand out in skills performance. Finland, Japan, the Netherlands, Norway, Sweden, they excel in all three areas, in literacy, in numeracy, in problem solving. These countries outperform most other countries. And that means that, for example, a higher proportion of their populations can understand and evaluate long texts, grasp complex or hidden meanings, and use existing knowledge to understand and complete tasks. Overall, Slovakian adults show numeracy skills that are similar to those in other countries, but Slovakia performs below average in literacy and in problem solving. What's particularly concerning is that 24% of Slovakian adults, that's almost a quarter, only show the literacy skills that you would expect from a 10-year-old child, level 1. They can understand short texts, and they can find specific information, but they have difficulties establishing meaning and follow more complex arguments. Mind you, as you can see, here on the chart, the share of low-performing adults in Slovakia is actually lower than on average across countries. So many countries have even bigger issues to tackle here. Another finding is that younger Slovakians moving into the labor force do no longer show better skills than those leaving for retirement. While the world of work has become a lot more demanding when it comes to literacy skills. As a result, while older Slovakians perform better than the OECD average, younger adults perform worse. Of course, those young adults are just a small percentage of Slovakia's population, but they are 100% of Slovakia's future. So providing better education for Slovakia's children and youth must be a priority. And last but not least, average skills in Slovakia went down compared to 2012 in both literacy and numeracy, a trend that we have also seen in many other countries. But the performance decline was actually quite large in Slovakia, and we saw it both among low and high-performing adults. In both numeracy and literacy, the share of low-performing adults grew and the share of high-performing adults shrank. In fact, in 28 of the 31 countries and economies that we surveyed, the literacy skills of young adults either dropped or remained static. Literacy skills of young adults only improved in England, in Finland, in Norway. And this is significant, not just for economic participation, but also for democracy and for informed political engagement. Particularly given the rise of misinformation, of fake news, of fabricated AI content. Why is all of that happening? Well, there are lots of reasons. Now, for example, changing business models and employment relations, such as people working alone online, could result in people not maintaining or learning new skills in the workplace as much as they did previously. Changing reading behaviors at work and at home. Think of the increased exposure to digital content, to social media, could have also have an impact. As more people enter higher education, the average skill level among graduates has also dropped. And this is really problematic, as it implies that tertiary degrees are no longer as strong an indicator of a person's skills as they once were. The survey of adult skills also allows us to study how skills are related to educational attainment and to gender. We don't see significant skill differences between Slovakian men and women, quite different from what we observe in other countries, where women generally did better than men in literacy and men generally did better in numeracy. A positive development is also that the socio-economic gap of skills has somewhat narrowed in Slovakia. So the skill distribution has become more equitable. As you would expect in all countries and economies, higher levels of educational attainment are associated with greater proficiency in literacy, numeracy, adaptive problem solving. Now that's no surprise. In Slovakia, adults with tertiary education scored 34 points higher in literacy than those with upper secondary education. And those with upper secondary education scored 17 points higher than those with less than upper secondary education. But this pattern of higher proficiency for tertiary educated adults doesn't always hold across borders. In literacy, university-educated adults in Slovakia, for example, score lower than adults with only an upper secondary school education in Finland. The question for Slovakian policymakers is how to improve credentialing systems so that they become more accurate and consistent reflections of a person's skills and knowledge. Systems should clearly show what people actually know and can do rather than just indicating the educational path they took. This would make it easier to compare qualifications and skills. It seems also that not all universities provide quality education to all students. Factors such as underfunding, lack of qualified faculty, outdated teaching methods, that all can hinder the effectiveness of higher education. In such cases, a university degree may not necessarily reflect a high level of skill or knowledge, at least by international comparison. For students, that means that the prestige of a degree should not be the sole factor in choosing an educational path. And in Slovakia particularly, vocational education and training often provides a really good alternative to university studies. It is really crucial to consider the quality of the institution and the skills it imparts. For employers, understanding those differences can help make more informed hiring decisions, focusing on the actual competences of candidates rather than just their educational qualifications. An important question is, of course, how skills make a difference in people's lives. The general picture is that, higher skills bring significant economic and social benefits. Of course, you can say, that adults with higher skills also tend to have, higher education qualifications. But the benefits of higher skills extend above and beyond the opportunities associated only with formal educational qualifications. Like in other OECD countries, Slovakian adults who score at the highest levels of proficiency have significantly better employment opportunities compared with adults who only score at or below level 1. Importantly, differences in employment outcomes by skill level persist even when comparing adults with similar educational attainment. The survey also shows that skills are closely related to both individual well-being. We looked at what people say about their health and life satisfaction, but also to civic engagement. Here we looked at political efficacy, at trust, at volunteering. The bottom line is that many low-skilled adults feel disconnected from political processes and lack the skills to engage with complex digital information, which is a growing concern for modern democracies. In many countries, many workers are mismatched to their jobs, and that means that their qualifications, their skills, or their fields of study are different from what their current job would require. Mismatches can result from an inefficient allocation of workers to jobs, but they can also reflect the fact that workforce skills and qualifications are not keeping pace with structural changes in the economy driven by digitalization, aging populations, the green transition. But actually, the situation is somewhat better in Slovakia than across OECD countries in this respect. Now, in Slovakia, about 18% of workers are overqualified. The OECD average for this is 23%, and a further 4% are underqualified, and here the OECD average is 9%. And that means that their highest educational qualifications above or below the level that is typically required for their job. About 5% of workers in Slovakia report that some of their skills are lower than what is required for their job. Now here the OECD average is 9%. Workers who lack essential skills for their job in Slovakia often say this is because they need to improve their skills in handling customers, clients, patients, or students, 35%, followed by computer or software skills, 33%. Finally, 36% of workers are mismatched in terms of field of study, because their highest qualification is not in the field that is most relevant to their job. Better match of workers to jobs according to their skills could raise both productivity and also the returns to education training. In OECD countries, adults who are overqualified for their job incur significant economic and social costs. But it's actually less the case in Slovakia. On average, their wages are 17% lower than peers in well-matched jobs who have similar education qualification. The OECD average here is 13%. So what can policymakers do to counteract the skills decline? Well, it requires a multifaceted approach to ensure learners are prepared for more rapid change than ever before. Embracing lifelong learning even more decisively will be so crucial. Policymakers should shift their focus from lifelong employment to lifelong employability. In today's rapidly evolving job market, individuals need to develop the skills and flexibility to adapt to changing industries, changing technologies, rather than relying on long-term job security with a single employer. And that shifts necessarily lifelong learning and life-wide learning. For individuals learn in different environments, in different situations, not just in formal education setting. Together with social partners, policymakers should review how modern workplaces allow adults to maintain and develop foundation skills. Developing adaptability is a key part of the strategy. Now, education training providers must be more responsive to changing demands and ensure that the right skills are being acquired at the right time in the most effective ways. And this demands forward thinking and more flexibility in provision, giving learners greater ownership over what they learn and how they learn and when in their lives they learn. We also need to find ways to make education and training more accessible. Countries can reduce barriers to lifelong learning by accommodating diverse learning needs and schedules, such as offering modular, part-time courses, evening classes, online learning opportunities. High initial costs can sometimes deter some potential learners. So financial support, for example, covering course fees, can help. And expanding entry points to recognize the skills individuals have acquired through non-formal and informal learning can sometimes smoothen the path towards formal learning opportunities. Improving the visibility and recognition of skills is also necessary, with skills documented in a way that is commonly accepted and understandable. Strengthening skills that are valuable across different industries, such as critical thinking, problem solving, communication, is so important. And finally, governments need to build strong coalitions with the business sector to find sustainable solutions for funding the rapidly increasing demand for skills. And that includes sharing the costs of adult learning between governments, enterprises, individuals, and involving businesses in decisions on when and where funding should be allocated. I know that many of those issues are actively discussed in Slovakia these days, and I have no doubt that current policy initiatives will bear fruits in the years to come.